people don't realize, especially if they've never been through it, they don't realize that you emotionally connect who you are based on how well you're doing financially. When you're doing well financially, you're on top of the world. You're confident, you're good. When you're not, you feel like a loser.
Hello, thank you for joining us on today's episode of Closers Club. Today we have Teresa Dodson. She's spent over 20 years building, scaling, and transforming companies across financial sectors, collections, and debt relief. From taking companies from 0 to 10 million in revenue to helping shape industry standards through organizations like America Fair Credit Council, to now leading one of the top consultancies in the space called Greenbacks Consulting. Teresa has seen every side of this industry: growth, compliance, operations, and what it actually takes to build something that lasts. Teresa, welcome to Closers Club. How are you today?
I'm fantastic. Thanks, Paul, for having me.
No problem. Is there anything else that you would like to kind of mention to our audience before we jump in and learn about you and Greenbacks Consultant?
Just because I've been in the industry for about 25 years, so it's the only reason why I know what not to do. That's it. So
There you go.
all that experience in there is just I'm just sharing with people that I work with, just so that they can avoid some of those pitfalls. And then I do have a nonprofit called Women of Debt Relief, but we can always touch on that at some point during the conversation.
Sounds great. Awesome. So 20 years experience. If you were building your career today in debt relief, um, what do you think you would have told yourself, right? Like if you were to look back and say like, oh yeah, you're going to have a 20-year career in debt relief. What would you have said to yourself?
That's a good question. I don't know if because a lot of times you ask that question of yourself of would you have done something differently,
Okay.
right? And I did it perfectly. It was awesome. The day I got into debt relief, I landed in the largest debt settlement company in the United States at the time. And so it was, and I didn't know anything about debt relief prior to being in it. I had no idea it even existed or what it was. Um, and I just immersed myself in the business. And what drew me to the business was you were really actually helping people. And I knew what it was like to be in debt. And I'd been there before. And I think that's why it spoke to me. So the only thing I could say is that I wouldn't have done anything differently. And I just immersed myself in the business to learn every aspect of it and took a lot of pride in the fact that you were really helping people get out of a very tough situation.
Okay. I want to jump into what immersing yourself in the business looks like. But before we jump into that, like when you were younger, college, pre-college, like what did you actually want to, be when you grew up?
This is funny. My mom used to always ask me that when I was a kid. And the only response that I ever gave her and still never changed it, I just want to be rich.
Yeah. I remember that's hilarious. I remember when my dad asked me that one question and I was like, how much money would it take to retire? And he's like, maybe $1 million. This is back in the 80s. And I was like, okay, I want to
Hmm.
be a millionaire. And the only reason why I wanted to be a millionaire is I didn't know you could be more than a millionaire. Like a millionaire is actually like not a lot of money for like
Mm-mm.
millionaire status. It's like the bare minimum. It's like,
Yeah.
man, I shot very low on that one.
But and even when I became a teenager and even, in my early 20s, I mean, I still was just trying to figure it out. I never had a direct vision of, I want to be a doctor or I want to be
Yeah.
a police officer. There wasn't anything like that. I just always knew I wanted to do something that I loved doing that made money. That was
Yeah,
it.
that's fair. Well, let's talk about debt relief. So what were you doing before you got into the debt relief business?
So I landed in the advertising agency industry.
Okay.
And so my very first job was at a marketing firm, actually. And we did marketing for doctors. And we did conferences for them and things like that. And, I remember my boss at the time was this wonderful man named Lonnie Hirsch. And he just saw something in me and just said, just, here are the guardrails, go. and he just trusted that I could grab onto it and make it something great. And that was very inspiring for me. And I really fell in love with marketing. And then it led into ad agencies. So ad agencies started seeking me out to come in and work with their creative teams. And long story short, I ended up running the operations in an ad agency at a couple of different ones, and I was typically overseeing not the account executive department, but typically like your art directors and copywriters and so forth. And I got to tell you, that was the best learning ground for me on how to motivate and work with different personalities and different people. I am so blessed that I got that as my learning ground on how to work with people, because you're working with creatives and you're working with very random personalities, and you have to have the right tools to know how to motivate each one to hit deadlines and to get things
Mhm.
done. And so I'm so appreciative that I just kind of fell into that. But I did that for about 11 years. Um, and then at a certain point, I just wanted something more. And what I mean by wanting something more, I wanted something that had an impact with a consumer in a positive way, like something that was meaningful, life changing, right? Um, I guess I had, an early midlife crisis, maybe. I don't know. But I was like tired of selling widgets and, stuff like that. And, yeah, I can market something, I can advertise something to get you to buy it. But is it really going to change your life? Is it really make it better? Does it make it worse? What is it? So that's when I started kind of looking for something a little different. I was just kind of done with advertising. Again, not quite sure at all what it is that I wanted to do industry-wise, but I knew I was very, very good at operations. And so I just started applying for positions that were, a director of operations type thing. And I happened to walk into the largest debt settlement company in the US at the time, and that's the beginning of the end. And I just fell in love with the industry and have been in it ever since.
So what is it about like debt relief or debt settlement that you just you just love, right? Like do you um gravitated to it, and is it the operations piece or is it really just the helping people piece?
It's the helping people piece, because operations, if you're good at it, and come to find out, had no idea. Apparently, I'm good at sales and marketing too. I mean, I guess I came from the marketing background. So I know all aspects of the business. But for me, it was the helping people, making a real impact. At the end of the day, being able to go, hey, this is what I do for a living, and I feel really good about it. You
And
know,
is there something within that where like was there like a specific moment that stood out where like firsthand where you saw, man, this is the reason why? Like, did you help like a specific? Were you working with like a prospect or a customer on settling debt and hearing their story and it stood out of like, wow, this is life changing and this is why I want to continue in that space? Is there any kind of a personal stories that you have on that?
absolutely, and I'll definitely share. I have 2 personal stories that were, like, kinda like, "Boom, I'm definitely in the right place."
Hmm.
The first was when I walked in the door and I interviewed for the job, and learning about debt settlement for the first time, because prior to that, because I entered into the debt settlement industry in 2003. Prior to that, in 1999, I had to do a bankruptcy.
Mm.
I ended a marriage that I was in, left me in a very bad situation. We'll just leave it at that. And I didn't have any other choice that I thought was available to me other than bankruptcy. And I'm a person that always had good credit, always paid my bills on time. And all of a sudden, I'm getting collection calls and my credit score's tanking. And all of these horrible things are happening. And understanding that that's such an emotional thing that happens. I think people don't realize, especially if they've never been through it. They don't realize that you emotionally connect who you are based on how well you're doing financially. And when you're doing well financially, you're on top of the world. I'm top dog. I'm feeling great. You're confident. You're good. When you're not doing well financially, you feel like a loser. You feel like I have failed miserably. And it's a deep emotional connection that people have with money. And that's when I felt it, when I was going through it. So when I go walking into a company that said I had another option this is how it works. I was like, "Oh my gosh, if I would have known this, I could have done this. This would have been much less painful. I could have absolutely managed my way through this program financially, and I could have got out of debt in like, it would have not been less time because I did the bankruptcy where everything went away, but it also stayed with me for 10 years, right?
Hmm.
So, this would have been a much better option." So, that was the first aha moment. The next aha moment was the first time I'm sitting on the customer service floor and I'm, managing, I managed the customer service negotiations team because I was actually the director of operations. And after that, very shortly after that, the COO, and really listening to the calls and listening to a consumer for the first time settle the last debt that they had and the relief that they had when it was all done. They were already happy because I remember they had 5 debts and 4 of them had already been resolved. And they were already so happy about that. And then when the last one got resolved and they were completely debt free, and this was within a 2-year period, actually, it was 2.5 years. So it wasn't that long. And just the relief in their voice. And they're like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe this is done. I can't believe this is gone. I now have more money in my bank account than I've ever had before because I'm not wasting it on all these credit card bills, and I
Hmm.
have a fresh new start to life." And the thing that I took away from that was, one, you were making an impact. I'm in the right place. And I knew what that client felt like. I remember when I came into that company, I fired half the people on the customer service floor. And the reason why I did after about a month of being there is because they were not empathetic and they were judging our clients. Want to know why? They never knew what it was like to be in debt. They never knew what it felt like to get a collection call and not know what to do. And I was like, if you talk to our clients that way and you can't empathize, get out, you know? So all of that just was it just that's what makes a really big impact is you being empathetic and also the clients being so appreciative of getting out of that debt and that sense of relief that they have. And I just knew I was in the right place at that moment. And I knew what it felt like to be them. And I wanted to continue to have that kind of impact moving forward as long as it would take me.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like with those stories, it's like those are really like positive and uplifting. Why do you think this industry gets a bad reputation at times?
Debt settlement companies not doing their job,
Okay.
quite frankly.
What does that
Um,
mean?
that means, and especially at the time that I got into the industry, it was prior to it being regulated.
Okay.
And so upfront fees were permitted. And what you would find is that there was a ton of companies that were taking fees and providing no service. They weren't settling the debt. They weren't getting it done. Or God forbid, you try to call customer service, and they didn't answer the phone. Now, after regulation, those kind of things still happen. So a lot of it is that's part of it. So they're signed up with a debt settlement company and they're not getting the service that they signed up for. That's one reason why the debt settlement industry gets a bad reputation. But the other reason why is managing those expectations coming into the program, not being fully transparent. I'm not saying everybody is not transparent. Okay. I'm just saying that, and it's gotten a lot better than it used to be. I believe I've gotten to see it when it was just the Cowboys running this thing versus, the way it is now. Um, that's the biggest problem is like if I'm a consumer and you haven't disclosed to me up front everything that I'm going to expect in this program, because it's not easy getting out of debt and it's not going to be fun. And that's why clients get mad. Clients get mad because you didn't tell them the truth and nothing but. But if
Yeah.
you tell them the truth and nothing but, there's a non-issue. But there's still, unfortunately, a handful of companies out there or a rogue sales rep or two, that does that. And then by the time they get to the servicing side of the business, then they're having to re-explain this again to a consumer, and a consumer's pissed. That's all
Yeah.
there
At
is
that
to it.
point. At that point. Yeah. That
Yeah.
makes sense. Would you say there are, you know, like specific attributes or operations that separate the companies that are doing it right with the ones that are actually kind of doing damage within the industry?
I think the ones that are doing damage within the industry, I'll start with that, I don't think they're doing it on purpose. I
Okay.
really don't. I think it's a lack of knowledge and not understanding how to manage the business properly, especially if you're a full service debt settlement company. I think it's a lack of understanding. Hence why I'm busy. I'm consulting with companies all the time because they realize that they may not be doing things the right way or the most efficient way that's going to service the client best. And so they need help with that. And I never think that it's intentional. I really don't. Now, what makes companies good at what they do are ones that have automated as much as they possibly can. For instance, we'll just take negotiations, making sure that you have as many scrubless processes set up as you possibly can, making sure that your CRM that you're using is automating that process as much as you can. Taking all the manual labor out of it as much as you can so that way you can push out volume and get a lot more done. That's for a lot less money, right? As far as your overhead costs and delivering bigger and faster results for the clients. Customer service, same thing. What makes a company really good at it is making sure that they're very well trained. Okay. They absolutely understand, I want everybody to understand how to take an escalated call. Okay. Consumers don't call you because they're happy with you. They don't call into their debt settlement company and say, gee, I just wanted to say you're doing a good job. They call in because they're freaked out about something or they need to have a question about something and they're probably stressed out a bit. Right. So you need to know how to answer that question truthfully and thoroughly and in the right way. And so I just am all about training, training, training. Okay.
Okay.
And retraining. That's what makes the biggest difference, I think.
And at what level is that, like the agent level, or what level is that training and education should be primarily focused on?
I think it's at all levels. I
Okay.
think your mid-level management and your executive management, it always comes from the top down, right? Your top down has to have the vision and be able to set the expectations of what it is that that training should look like. And you also need to make sure from the top level down that you really truly understand the product that you're offering. You're offering debt settlement. What does that mean? What is it you can and can't do? More more than I'd like to admit. I will go into a company and they're saying things that are just not true. And it's again, not on purpose because they just didn't know. And so that really comes from the top down. And then your mid-level management being thoroughly trained on that and understanding like what it is you can and can't say, what really does happen in a negotiation process. Understanding the negotiation process. Like on the negotiation side, there's many times I've gone into a negotiations team and they don't understand the difference between I'm a direct issuer, I'm a collection agency, and I'm a debt buyer. They just say, "Oh, debt buyer." Well, no, there's collection agencies, and that's the majority of the stuff that you work with right now, and you have to explain that. That scares me. It's like, okay, you are negotiating on a consumer's behalf. You need to understand exactly how collections works, right? And you need to know the right timing of when to resolve those debts, when not to, have the right connections, the scrub list process set up. So all of that is tied to training, right? And having really good product knowledge and being able to disseminate that down through the ranks.
Yeah. And what, like, so disseminating that down and even the training, what does that look like? Is that an ongoing thing, or I'm just trying to think through like putting myself in the shoes. If I was an agent that was working at a settlement company, um, what would my first 30 days look like? And then on ongoing of that, like how do I continue to stay knowledgeable in this space to make it so that I can be a good agent, right? And grow within my career, in this industry.
Well, regardless of what department you're in, the first thing that you should be handed on day one is SOPs, standard operating procedures. Okay. That way, and you understand, you have all the proper training on exactly how everything from the workflow standpoint is supposed to happen, and you understand exactly how to use the CRM that you're in. There's a lot of time spent from, especially if you're a representative that comes from another company and moves to a different one, you can be on a different CRM. That can make all the difference in the world on how efficient you are at your job, right? So you want to make sure you're thoroughly trained on that. That's a no-brainer, and that you have standard operating procedures and a handbook to be able to look out for that. Then you have to have proper scripting. Every department has scripting, I would say, except for maybe negotiations. So your sales, your customer service teams, your retention teams, even your payments team has scripting, and you want to make sure there's consistency throughout the companies or throughout the company. For instance, I've always said, look, I want to make sure my salespeople are using the same language my customer service people are using. An example of that is, what if my sales rep, when they enrolled somebody, called it a debt resolution program. And then they get to my customer service agent and they call it a debt settlement program. I'm telling you, I've watched it happen. It sets somebody off. What? Wait a minute. I thought it was resolution. What's settlement? I know
Yeah.
that sounds stupid, but the littlest things like verbiage is so important. So that's the biggest thing that I think has a really good impact in a very well-ran company. There's many things, but that's one of the things is the verbiage being consistent throughout the company.
Yeah, I mean, that totally makes sense. And what do you think that when it comes to training, when it comes to scripting, what do you think that where most people get it or most companies get it wrong?
From a sales standpoint, 'cause it depends. So from a sales standpoint, I think where they get it wrong is workflow. They're all
Workflow.
saying the same thing,
Uh-huh.
right? They're all saying, they're all saying, like, "This is what the program is," and there's all these different parts in the script that you have to cover. There's the disclosures and everything else. But if you have something in the wrong spot at the wrong time, it can make the difference between closing a deal and not closing a deal, okay? It's all about, like, you're telling a story. And so if, let's say, for instance, before you did a credit pull and you haven't done a budget analysis to go with that. Okay, well, you need to be able to understand what their expenses are and how much money they make along with that credit pull. But what if you didn't do that and you did it later on down in the script? Well, that doesn't make sense. They both tie together, right? Simple little things like that. So from a workflow perspective, that's how you could screw that up. From like a customer service perspective, it's really about answering the question the right way. Okay. Not sugarcoating anything. So if you've got a client that's calling in and they're like, you did not tell me that my credit score was going to go down. Why is my credit score being impacted? Well, you have to have the right answer for that. And you can't sugarcoat it. You can't have a customer service rep that's afraid or has been coached to try to divert an answer to the question, so to speak. I'm always very direct about it. I'm like, well, no, this was covered, and that was actually part of one of the disclosures. And I see here that was covered in the welcome call. But let's review it again. Yeah, it's going to take a negative. Your credit score is going to take a negative impact throughout the program because you're already in a bad situation with your credit score as it is, and it's gonna take a negative impact as you continue not to pay them. But as we get these debts paid off, guess what? Your credit score will rebound, okay? Because you no longer owe that debt. You're in this program to get out of debt. Why are you worried about a credit score right now? Because you're not buying anything because nobody's gonna give you anything.
Mm.
You have to be that confident. Anybody I'm training in sales, customer service, anywhere in the company, confidence is everything. I wanna make sure they're so trained that they can sound like I just did, because a consumer, it's like a drop of blood in the water. Again, I tie it back to your finances are personal, okay? You have a personal reaction to it. These clients are very upset, and it's not your fault. They're just in a heightened state of upsetness, let's say, because they're in debt
Yeah,
and they're drowning.
there's just higher irritability, right?
Yeah, so you
Yeah.
have to know how to diffuse that. The other thing you have to really do is, let them know, "Hey, it's gonna be okay," or "I've been there." This is the worst. Actually, the worst that it was is when you were doing nothing,
Yeah.
but you've
How
actually taken control of things, you're doing something.
and how much like if you were an agent, right, or even in your customer experience side, how much is from the agent's perspective, like how much is it adding in a personal story? How much is that important, when scripting or when talking with, with customers or, people that you're trying to work with from the debt side?
I think if you're confident and trained well enough to do that, I think it's wonderful. I think it's the difference between retaining a client and not. I mean, again, finances are personal. They're feeling very vulnerable. And if you can connect with them in any way, I'm talking from the sales and customer service standpoint, any way that you can connect with your consumer and identify with them and empathize with them. And this is my personal story as well. I've been there. Guess what? That call is going to go a heck of a lot better because they're already in that state of being
Yeah.
of it's personal to me. How can you help me? Be not only be empathetic, but to be able to understand what they're going through. We used to always say, God, a long time ago, we used to say that our customer service agents were therapists. They kind of are. They're financial therapists because these people are going through a lot and you have to be able to connect with them and understand them in that way.
And I would think that you don't really have, especially if this is like the first time call, you don't really have a lot of time to kind of build that level of trust. Like what do agents need to do within the first 10, 15 seconds of a call to help get to that spot where someone's willing to continue talking to them about, debt recovery, recovery, uh, settlement, whatever that outcome is. But how do these agents actually, what is your advice to these agents to help build trust within that first 10 to 15 seconds?
So I don't think you can build trust in the first 10 to 15 seconds. I don't think it's possible, especially when you're talking about something that's personal. But what you can begin to build within that time frame is confidence. You have to be in control of that call, and I mean when you have to be in control of that call, it means you know what you're talking about. I don't mean it the way that it sounds, like, "Oh, you have to be in control of the call, and you're controlling that person." No, you are the expert. That consumer has reached out to you because they need help. If they could do this or wanted to do this on their own, they would have done it. You're the expert. Be that expert. Don't sound weak. Don't hem and haw. Don't be like, "Oh, well, I don't know." Know your shit.
Yeah.
Okay? Know it. You've been trained for this. This is exactly what you're very knowledgeable about. That's why they're calling you. Be very confident. And as you're talking to that consumer, they will begin to trust that. Because if you even hesitate or consumers are a lot smarter than what people give them credit for. They can detect bullshit pretty quick. Okay? I mean, a lot of us can. Just don't do that and be honest with them and just know your stuff. That's the biggest thing I can say. Be confident and know your stuff. If you get on that phone and you're not 100% confident, they're going to smell it. It's like a drop of blood in the water and it's done.
So that takes us back to what we were talking about earlier is how you immersed yourself in the business, right? And like knowing your stuff. Like how did you get immersed within debt relief, right? Like how did you im- get into the business? What was that like? Who were influential figureheads that you were following, that you were, reading their books, listening to their talks, seeing them at conference, et cetera, et cetera. Like, how did you get into the business and essentially grow it, grow your, career to where it is today?
Yeah, I mean, to where I had the knowledge, right?
Hmm.
Um, I was really fortunate again to land in the largest debt settlement company at the time. And both of the owners of that company were my mentors. Um, and it's so odd because one of them, him and I still do other businesses together. And 25 years later, we still are in business together. We do other things. Um, but I was fortunate enough to learn from the best. They had all the knowledge. And I'm one of those people I absorb like a sponge. I ask questions. I'm constantly asking questions. If I don't understand something, I need clarification. I don't want to and if it doesn't make sense to me, even if they said something to me that didn't make sense, I question them. You know, I want to make sure that it's something that resonates with me, that I understand it. So I was really fortunate in that aspect to have two people out of the gate that were probably the best product. They had the best knowledge of the debt settlement industry than anybody out there and understood exactly how it works. The next step for me was, and I was kind of the only I was the only, I'm not going to say kind of, I was the only person doing this. I learned very quickly. I was only at the company for about 3 months. And I'm like, okay, half my time I'm talking to creditors. Half my time I'm talking to collection agencies and debt buyers. Why am I not going to their conferences? Why am I not like going to their office? I need to understand their business and I need to understand how debt works from their side of the fence so I can better have better conversations with them. I can better negotiate for my clients, right? Or if they hate my guts, which back then, by the way, they all did, every single one of them.
I find that
Um,
impossible.
no, it was possible. They did. They hated it wasn't personal. They just hated the industry. But I will have to say, you know what? I'll go for this. Um, I broke down a lot of barriers, and it's probably because I'm easy to talk to, maybe. I don't know. But
Like, such as? Like, what barriers did you break down?
well, the first thing out of the gate is I registered for the Debt Buyers Association conference. 2 weeks later, they called me up and they said, "You're a debt settlement company. We've refunded you. You're not allowed to come." And I took that as a challenge. And I'm like, all right, well, this whole year I'm going to spend building relationships with people that actually go to these conferences and I'm going to get in. And a year later, I did. Um, how we broke the barrier on how debt is being resolved today. And I give all the credit to, again, the owners of the company, Wade Torkelson being one of them. I mean, he is my mentor. Um, is we told them, look, we need to get in there and talk to you about how debt settlement clients work because they had no idea. And you have to understand these consumers, they don't want to just stop paying you. They actually are putting aside funds because they want to settle with you. They want to pay you something versus nothing. Back then, Paul, nobody knew that on the creditor side. They did not get it at all. This was a long time ago. So they had no idea that that's how it worked. But once that switch in their head flipped and they realized that consumer is easier to collect on than a standard consumer ignoring my call, it was off to the races. And so we started developing really good creditor relationships with the debt settlement industry. And then they started asking me to speak at their conferences and educate them. So it was all about educating the creditor and collection side of the industry on how debt settlement works. Now, out of the gate, did I get beat up a lot? Yeah, I got beat up a lot, but that's okay. Keep swinging. I'm here to educate. It's fine. And over time, those barriers started falling down, falling down, falling down. So Wade and I were really big advocates for pushing that door open. And the other thing that we changed in the industry is typically once they understood that, hey, these consumers have, about 8 credit cards in the program, right? It's not just your account they're trying to resolve. They realized that they needed to kind of they had to get in line, right? So how do we do that best? Or how do we solve like settling more debt faster? Term settlement payment arrangements. Back then it was one payment, that's it. Here's my settlement offer, one payment. Once they understood how debt settlement clients work, all of a sudden they're like, well, shoot, okay, I'll stretch it over 6 payments. I can do that so I can get my money sooner than later. And we were the reason why, when we were educating them, how that barrier came down, and that flipped the entire industry and how we negotiate and settle debt as of today.
Okay. Do you, kind of thinking through like your background and like how you've like grown businesses, do you have a playbook that you run or that you're used to running when, building up these teams and, the debt settlement businesses you've scaled?
It depends on what point you walk in, right? So if I'm doing a startup from the ground up, yeah, there's a playbook. The playbook is I mean, I have all the SOPs and all the all the operating procedures, all the training materials and the scripts from everything from sales to customer service negotiations. I understand that entire process. So walking into a company that's a brand new startup and being able to work with them to do that, I've got that playbook already just because I've been doing it for so long. I've built 4 different companies at this point, right?
Yeah.
So that's the playbook for that. Then the playbook, even for that model, is teaching them how to hire not based on experience. That is important, but based on skill set. More often than not, what I see is I see people hiring people because, oh, they worked at this company for so many years. Oh, they've got it. Let's go ahead and let's hire them. But did they have the right skill set for that position? Were they successful in that position? I have actually taken people that were in sales that were okay, but they were better negotiators. and I've taken negotiators that were better at sales. It's like you have to identify the right skill set. So I'll actually go through each job position with a client of mine and identify these are the skill sets that you need to be looking for these particular positions. And that will happen even with a company that I go into, part two, when I go into a company that's already running, that's already built, and they're like, I want you to come in and take a look at everything we're doing from front to back. Tell me if there's anything that we can do to improve it, if there's anything that we're missing. And so I will apply that same rule to everybody in those positions. But the first thing that I do is I don't like people or consultants or any kind of senior management that comes in and just starts swinging the bat around. It's just so unproductive. I mean, you are not going to get buy-in from the people that are there. You have to come in and be an observer. You have to ask questions. You have to meet with, like your executive team, then your middle management team. Get down on the floor, man, and meet with your reps, talk with people, really understand and I absorb information for 30 days, right? If that was a playbook, that's part of it. Absorb and gather all the information you can. You don't have to go in there swinging a bat to prove why you're good at your job. Who cares? Okay. I want to absorb everything and be able to assess, okay, this is what I'm seeing. And also by that time when you're meeting with these people, you're expressing to them, I'm just trying to understand what you do, trying to understand why you do it, what you struggle with, because I'm here to help, right? And guess what? You get buy-in. So whenever you're starting to try to make some changes that you need to make, then guess what? Everybody's on board with you. Um, and it also helps you identify on the negative side of things. It helps you identify the people you need to cut. Because
Yeah.
there's always that. You always go in and go, you know what? This is the wrong person for this position, or they're just not good at their job and you're going to need to cut it. We need to replace that position.
That's totally fair. Um, I kind of want to change gears for a minute or two. What at Greenback Consulting, what does it look like from the outbound sales perspective? Like, what is your guys' approach to that? How did you start getting connected with Convoso?
So from outbound sales, if I'm hired to be able to go in and actually build out a sales team or kind of retrain their sales team, and it's just isolated to that, I am going to be looking at their dialer. I'm going to be looking at the efficiencies that they have in place from a technical perspective before I even dive into what is each sales rep like?
Yeah.
What does their scripts look like? I want to know that their tools are working first,
And what do you
right?
look for? What do you look for in a dialer?
Um, speed to lead. That's what I like to call it. It's like, okay, I want to make sure that, one, everything's feeding into the dialer the correct way. And I want to make sure my speed to lead is, optimal. That makes all the difference in the world because it's a very competitive environment in debt settlement. That same client is being probably marketed to by 5 different companies. And the person that gets to that client first wins.
Mhm.
That's all there is to it. I mean, if you're good, that does make a big impact. So I want to make sure that that's working. And then obviously I evaluate their lead providers and how they're getting leads, what type of leads are they getting, and also be able to take a look at what those KPIs look like. I know what direct mail is going to give you. I know what a web form lead is going to get you. Live transfers, I want to make sure that they're hitting those marks. And if they're not, let's take a look at why not. But again, I go back to I want to make sure that everything technically is working. So that way I don't have a manager or a rep telling me, well, it's because the system sucks. It's because of this, it's something other than them. I want to
Yeah,
eliminate that immediately.
that's fair. What other, KPIs do you look at, when you're evaluating performance outside of speed to lead?
I'm looking at for conversions, right? So I'm looking at response rates, conversion rates. How many times that rep actually spoke to a person in that day based on the number of leads that they've been given. Because I'm going to break it down by each individual sales rep. I want to be able to know that they're actually performing. I also rank with the manager. They need to be listening to a certain amount of calls with their reps every day in coaching. So multitude of those things. And then of course that That varies a bit, again, depending on the type of marketing. If it's direct mail, it's going to look a little different than, web form leads that come in and that post to the system. That's going to be a little bit different because your conversion rates on those are different than what they are on direct mail. Also, the time frame of what it takes to convert those could be different as well. It's a
That's
different
totally fair.
conversation.
Yeah, totally fair. If you had to give one piece of advice to any of the sales teams that are listening to this podcast, what would that piece of advice be?
Don't just don't just look at your script and become perfect at sales. Look at the entire business and understand how when you enrolled that consumer, what is their journey going to be?
Yeah,
Don't just I mean, I see that all the time where they just isolate themselves, where they understand the sell and they just enroll them and they're gone, but they don't truly understand how the debt settlement program works. They don't realize what's going to happen in customer service. They don't realize what's going to happen at the negotiations process. If that is the one piece of advice that I can give, and I give it all the time, you need to know all aspects of the business. And it doesn't have to be down to every detail, but at least from a high level, so that way, when you're talking to your client on the phone and you're talking them into this is a good option for you and you're enrolling them, you truly understand what their journey is going to look like. And you're not going to leave anything out and you're going to manage their expectation, right? And guess what that turns into? A client that's retained. You're not going to lose that client. That client's going to be like, wait, nope, you did tell me about this. Yep, you told me this is what I can expect. Because the most powerful conversation that a consumer has is with the first person they talk to, because they're going to spend an hour, hour and a half on the phone with you.
yeah,
Okay. So that makes a big impact. So knowing again, just know your shit. Know exactly what they're going to expect throughout this program. And that's going to make the biggest difference in not only how many deals you close, but how many you keep.
very fair. What do you think is like the one lesson that if you have to look back at all your years of being in debt settlement, what is the one lesson that you learned that just feels so obvious today?
One lesson that I learned that feels obvious today. I don't know. I actually don't know an answer
Be
for that.
something. There's got to be something on this. Thinking back, is it? You said earlier that you would fire employees, because they weren't expressing the right amount of empathy, right? You mentioned that how finance is so personal to us these days, right? So we need to kind of approach these spaces differently. So I know there's got to be some lessons that you've learned over the years that you know you feel are more obvious today than they were 10 years ago.
Okay, fair enough. Now I'm in line with you. Um, because you know what? I've always trusted my gut,
Hmm.
and I've always been tapped into how to be able to not only relate to my employees, but relate to consumers. You know what? Don't think you know everything. Just don't think I walk into every situation like, yeah, I know what I know, but I might learn something new. And be open. Just be open. You will be so amazed at what you can learn from people that you never expected. The other thing that I always do too is always take a meeting. Even though you don't have time, even though you don't want to, you think it's not even going to be productive for you, take it. I can't tell you how many times that I was like, I don't have time for this crap. I don't want to take a meeting. I don't even know. I don't even want to do this. And guess what it does? It opens up a door that I didn't expect every single time. Totally opens up a door, this great new opportunity that's going to happen, or this other great tool that I could be using to help my clients, or, it's going to better this company. Every time I do that, I'm surprised. And so I now know whenever I'm resisting something, I just dive into it. I'm like, don't
Yeah,
do that.
that's fair. That's definitely a good assessment too. Well, Teresa, thank you so much for the time today. Before we close, I don't know if there's any last words you want to mention. I know that you have a nonprofit you might want to speak to a little bit. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, we can use that time to kind of wrap things up and just learn a little bit more about the nonprofit.
Thank you. Yes, I love talking about that. It's the passion project. Again, nonprofit. It doesn't make me any
What
money.
what got
Uh,
you what got you wanted to what influenced you to start a nonprofit?
what influenced me to do it was that I wanted to launch Women of Debt Relief because we are in the financial services industry. It's a very male dominated industry. I remember going to my very first debt settlement conference back in 2004, and I was one of 3 women in a room of 300. And I was like, "Holy crap, what have I done? This is so weird," right? And I learned a lot. I learned a lot over the years navigating through the financial services industry, and it's changed a lot. I mean, you still have, you definitely have it's more male dominated, but you have many, many more women in it. But still to this day, you really have less than 10% of those women are in executive management. And so I was like, I really would love to be able to start up this nonprofit and see if there's any interest in people being members. So I can help women and I can, have other women that are part of this organization to help guide women through their career. Not having them make the same mistakes that I made, teaching them that, listen to some of your male counterparts. They actually have some pretty valuable tools and some ways that they do things that makes them more successful because you're the one holding yourself back, things like that. And learning and also creating a network that we can kind of support each other. Because it's very male dominated. We are faced with different obstacles that maybe other industries aren't. And when I put it out there, it was 5 years ago in March that I launched it, and I had it in at a conference, and I said I rented a room and just invited anybody to come to see if there was an interest, and the room was packed. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm onto something here. So here we are 5 years later. Have a tremendous amount of growth. We have people that are members from not only the debt settlement side of the industry, but also the collection side of the industry as well, which is what I always wanted. But we are right now in the middle of a rebranding, which I'm very excited about. And the reason why is because a lot of the feedback that we got from the banking and the collection side of the industry is all these women really wanted to join. And this tells you where we still are in debt settlement, but their company would never let that happen because the word debt relief was in women of debt relief. I'm like, well, that's not what I wanted. That was not what I wanted to accomplish at all. And I'm like, and we heard it so many times that it was great feedback. And I'm like, well, we can rebrand this. And so that's what we're doing right now. And that officially launches on June 1. We do have a new name, but it's top secret because we have to launch it to our members first. And we are already getting an overwhelming amount of interest once the rebrand is done. It's going to blow up. Like we're going to have so many more members from the collection side of the industry. And what I love about that is debt settlement and collections and banks are constantly trying to network together to be able to have a more cohesive relationship and be able to settle debt. And we have been instrumental in the last 2 years in creating that bridge. And it's kind of our niche of what we've been doing. And I was just at a creditor roundtable yesterday representing women of debt relief, and that was happening again. So it's exciting. It's an organization that supports women on their career path and also a great network for women. But even more importantly, we want men involved too, because we have corporate memberships and a lot of the events that we throw, half the room is men. And the feedback we're getting from the men is like, you know what? I had no idea that women looked at things like that. And now I have a better idea of how to communicate with my executive or with my mid-level management women to be able to support them better. So it's something for everybody and it's not just women. So the whole idea at the end of the day is to create really good positive impact that helps everybody grow.
That's great. That's fantastic. Well, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing the new branding come June. So yeah, looking forward to that announcement. So thank you, Teresa. Really appreciate you being on the pod today. And thank you all for tuning in. Appreciate it. And see you on the next episode.
Well, thank you. It's been fun.